If you've clicked on this video, then you're probably interested in how watching Unstable Universe got me an A in school on my English project. But first, some context. The project that we got in my English class was to create the perfect civilization, and immediately as my teacher began explaining it and giving some ideas, my gears immediately began turning. I usually read a lot of dystopian books like Legend, The Hunger Games, Divergent. Besides The Hunger Games, that government could never work in a million years. The one thing most dystopian books have in common is that the ideology of the government could have potentially worked, but the new factors of corruption, unfairness, or just the way that it's executed is terrible, and the protagonist just ends up screwing everything up. But anyways, I started brainstorming some ideas from these books, and what made sense to me the most was the factions from Divergent. If you've never read Divergent or seen the movies, there are basically 5 factions that society is divided into: Abnegation, Dauntless, Amity, Erudite, and Candor. Each faction is responsible for one thing. However, what made this not work was that you got to decide what faction you wanted, but mostly because it was chosen for you in an aptitude test. There was no free trial, and if you failed initiation, you were factionless, which is basically homelessness. And during this time, I started rewatching Unstable SMP, so obviously I was thinking about that during brainstorming of the project. Now, every civilization from Parrot's POV and Unstable Universe, the players only want one thing: a place where they can live in peace without the constant threat of destruction. And most of these civilizations failed, not because of the inside corruption, but because of the invisible mafia, or some other group like the Law. But the one civilization that had to have lasted the longest was probably the Farland civilization. And that was the ground of which I based our project off of. In a way, the Farland civilization had some similarities to Divergent, that being the 3 clans. In the Farland civ, there was the Builder's clan, self-explanatory, Farmer's clan, also self-explanatory, and the Warrior clan. And all 3 clans worked together. But the farmers and the warriors hate each other because the warriors didn't protect the farmers when the mafia attacked them, and the farmers didn't have any people to farm the resources for the warriors. I don't know. It was weird. But this was due to Purpled corruption as a leader of the Farland civilization, and eventually the downfall of the entire Farland civilization. Just like in a Divergent novel, the ideology of the government was good, but the execution was not, and corruption eventually brought the whole thing down. So, using this information, my team and I created a base, a foundation, if you will. Having Horace Altman as the discoverer of the Farlands, or in our case, we took over New Zealand, we now had a setting where we could build our civilization. Now, to start eliminating the problems in our world from our civilization, first off, the biggest one, debt. How do we solve that? Well, in our backstory, which I will show our slides later on, we talk about how the world debt clock reaches record high and all other countries besides the US were broke with worthless currency. Leading to this, all the other countries turn against the United States, and we ally with Australia after paying off their debt. So, once a small militia arrives in New Zealand with money, we decide to create our own little civilization. And because it's brand new and we have some money to start off with, we will not have any debt originally to begin with. The next problem our world faces constantly is famine, unfortunately. The lack of food and water, and this is where we bring in the districts. Farming district, medical district, military district, builders district. These are the main districts in our civilization. farming district is responsible for the food and water harvesting in the civilization. And each district has their own jobs too. But I will put up our PowerPoint presentation towards the middle, towards end of the video. So make sure to stay tuned for that. And it will explain all the information on there. Other problems that we face in our world include homelessness and underground stuff that I can't say, or I may have this video taken down, but we solved all that in our civilization. More on that later. Originally, we had a pretty difficult time coming up with a name that wasn't kind of corny or dumb. The first thing we came up with was the Tri-Tropical Civilization, which didn't really, get there. Then one of my teammates recommended, why don't we name it Perfect, but in another language, because the project was to create a perfect civilization. I had some thoughts about this, but it was a little bit of a stretch as to how obvious I was referencing Unstable SMP. But that morning, I had just finished watching Parrot's video, Escaping Paragon, Minecraft's Most Perfect Prison. And in this video, he talked about how the word Paragon literally translated to something perfect. So after my teammate said this, I recommended, how about we name it Paragon? And our entire team loved it, so that's what we named our civilization. Hi, note from future Gems of Gems. While editing this, I decided to save you the pain of a longer video. So if you actually care about the lore, I'm just going to display images up on the screen, and you can pause to go read them. Now, fast forward to presentation day. We were not nervous at all, and I was ready to cook. I knew exactly what I was going to say. Then my teammate, same guy who made our commercial, stole my spotlight, started yapping and explaining everything like he was not going to let me talk at all. Also, the presentation day was not what I'd expected at all. Basically, all you did was talk a bit about your ad and then present the ad itself, and I had to insert myself and basically interrupt him because he wouldn't let me present, even though I was the one who carried the project on my shoulders. But anyways, we finished presenting, and I really hope nobody else in my class is watching this because, to be honest, all of the other ads were absolute garbage, and ours was the only actual good one. They were all either just freaking demographics of their slideshows, or, I don't know, some TikTok dance, and one team even fully AI generated their ad and used AI slop. Looking at you, Annabelle. But anyways, now for the grading. We lost 3 points on the slides because the person on our team who was in charge of the government forgot to make laws, but I low-key carried the entire project, as I probably mentioned here and there, editing left and right, cooking up ideas, and finally we turned our slides in, and I waited for our teacher to grade them. Then, one fine Thursday morning, I wake up and I go to check the grade book, and eventually, there it is. A beautiful 95% on the ad and a 97% on the slides. But something was off. Our teacher gave us a 60 on our process planning packet. Wait, what? This was supposed to be a video on how I got an A on my English project. How could I get an A if I was failing? Well, you see, it wasn't me. My team actually sold on this one, because a lot of the people in our team didn't turn in their planning pages, making us score very low on this. Finally, the same guy who made the ad spent half of his lunch period negotiating with our teacher to get our grade up, and eventually we got from a 60 to a 75. So it's not the worst ending we could have possibly gotten. I did still get an A on the actual major grade, and it's not my fault that me and the commercial guy served my teammates up the best project in the class on a silver platter, and they still sold this badly. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and That would really help me out. Thank you, and till next time. I also know that one of my friends, or a few of them, are probably gonna see this, so just so you guys know, it's just for the content. Don't take it personally.